Hello guys, welcome you all to the Insights into Books podcast. Before we start, kindly follow or subscribe us, and if you want daily summary files of these books, then subscribe us on Gumroad. Links are in description. Now let's start today's discussion, guys. So today we're doing a really crucial deep dive. We're trying to get past all the myths and the stories about startup genius, the Silicon Valley legends.
And moving beyond the folklore.
Exactly. We want to look at a really systematic way to handle the chaos of starting something new, whether it's a brand new company or maybe trying to innovate inside a huge existing one. Our mission really is to break down this thing called the lean startup methodology. We want to focus on what makes it tick. The speed, the constant experimenting, and just learning really fast when you don't even have a map yet.
And that mission, it's absolutely vital because the stakes involved here are just incredibly high. Think about it. For decades, the standard way of doing things involved these massive, long planning cycles.
Right. The huge business plans.
Right. Exactly. Huge upfront investment, launching in stealth mode with what you hope is a perfect product. But the results of that old model, they're frankly terrifying.
Yeah, I've seen the numbers.
Industry data keeps showing it again and again. Something like 90% of all new startups, they just crash and burn.
90%. That's sobering.
It is. And even the ones that get significant VC funding, the venture-backed ones, about 75% of those ultimately hit a wall they can't get past. So this methodology we're talking about, it isn't just some fad. It's a rigorous, scientifically grounded blueprint, really.
A blueprint for what exactly?
For increasing your odds of success. For making better, faster, more informed decisions when you're operating in that fog of uncertainty, when certainty is a luxury you just don't have.
The failure rate? Wow. It's like the ghost haunting every single entrepreneur, isn't it?
It really is.
And the approach we're digging into today, it feels like such a radical shift. Because it starts by saying, look, the traditional management tools, the ones that are great for running things smoothly, for optimizing in stable situations.
Yeah, the MBA playbook, essentially.
Right. Those tools are completely wrong for the volatile world of creating something new. It's basically throwing out that huge, detailed business plan, which, let's be honest, is often just wishful thinking written down.
A work of fiction, based on hope and assumptions.
And replacing it with something, I guess, more scientific, more iterative, focused on testing the core idea right away.
Precisely. And to really get our heads around this, we need to start with the definition. What is a startup, according to this way of thinking? It's not just a small company.
Okay, so what is it?
It's defined very specifically as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Extreme uncertainty. That phrase seems key.
It's the key differentiator. And it dictates everything else, especially the kind of management you need.
So extreme uncertainty means you don't know who your customer is, really. You don't know what they actually want or value. You might not even know which technology is going to work out.
Exactly, all of the above. And that's why traditional management just falls flat. It's built for predictability, for known variables. Startups operate in the unknown.
Okay, so if that's the environment, what's the goal?
Therefore, the core, the single most important goal of the startup is, well, it sounds simple, but it's incredibly hard to figure out the right thing to build.
The right thing.
Yes. The product or service that customers actually want and, crucially, will pay for. And you need to figure that out as quickly as humanly possible. It's not about writing perfect code initially. It's about finding that market need first.
That immediately shifts the focus then. It suggests that success isn't just luck or genius. It can be engineered somehow.
Exactly right. The whole approach rests on the idea that startup success isn't purely random chance or some kind of magic or just gut feeling. It's something that can be engineered, or, maybe better put, it can be learned through disciplined management.
What does that look like in practice?
It means managing the venture through constant, structured, hypothesis-driven experimentation. Think like a scientist running experiments in a lab, but the lab is the marketplace.
Okay, so testing ideas constantly.
Yes. And this is a huge contrast to that old build it and they will come idea we mentioned.
Right. The field of dreams approach to business.
Exactly. And in this new framework, the actual building part, coding the final, polished, scalable product that's actually one of the least important initial steps, the learning has to come first. Always.
Why is that sequence so critical?
Because if you scale up, if you pour resources into building and marketing before you've learned what the market actually wants, you're just accelerating towards failure. You're efficiently driving off a cliff. Learning must precede scaling.
I think a lot of people still hear entrepreneurship and immediately picture like two people in a garage working on some tech thing, a small company.
That's the stereotype for sure.
But a key idea here seems to be that this kind of managing under uncertainty, it's needed everywhere, not just in tiny startups.
It absolutely is. And we need to broaden our definition of entrepreneurship. It's really a specific type of management designed for uncertainty. And entrepreneurs, or maybe call them intrapreneurs, if they're inside a big company, they're everywhere.
Like where? Can you give examples?
Sure. Think about General Electric. Huge established company, right? They implemented something called the FastWorks program specifically to speed up new product launches and manage their massive R&D efforts. They were essentially running internal startups using these exact lean principles.
Interesting. So GE was doing lean startup.
Effectively, yes. Adapted for their scale. Or look at Intuit, the company behind QuickBooks and TurboTax. They use lean principles constantly to innovate internal processes and to launch new services aimed at very specific customer groups, like specialized versions of QuickBooks for different industries. They test and learn.
So in this model, what's the role of leadership? If it's not just dictating the plan.
Leadership becomes about creating the right environment, setting up the culture, the conditions, the psychological safety nets that allow employees to run the necessary experiments quickly, without them fearing that a failed experiment means career suicide.
So leaders need to define the destination, the big vision, but maybe let go of needing to dictate the exact route from the start.
That's the crucial balance, the entrepreneur's vision, that ultimate destination, the dream of building a thriving, world-changing business that needs to be the constant. The North Star.
Okay.
But the strategy, the detailed roadmap of features, the marketing plan, the timelines, that's just one possible path to reach the vision. It's a set of hypotheses, and you absolutely must have the courage to change that strategy, to iterate on it, even throw it out completely based on what you learn. You can't cling to your initial plan if the data tells you it's based on flawed assumptions.
We see that happen all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
Companies sticking to a plan even when it's clearly not working.
Ego gets in the way, fear of admitting you are wrong. But the lean approach demands that flexibility.
Can we look at an example? You mentioned Zappos earlier. Their vision was a huge online shoe store.
Right. A dominant player in online footwear.
What was their initial strategy, and how did they have to iterate?
Well, Nick Swinmurn, the founder, his first big hurdle, his biggest leap of faith was, would people even buy shoes online in the first place? Back then, that was a huge question mark.
Yeah, you can't try them on.
Exactly. So he could have followed the traditional path, raise millions, build a giant warehouse, stock it full of inventory, build a fancy website, all based on the assumption that demand existed.
But he didn't do that.
No. His first experiment, his initial strategy, was incredibly simple, almost crude. He went to local shoe stores, took photos of their shoes, put the photos up on a basic website. If someone actually placed an order,
What then?
he would physically go back to the store, buy the shoes at retail price, and then ship them himself.
Wow. That sounds completely unscalable and probably not very profitable initially.
Totally unscalable, manual, inefficient, low margin. But it was fast, and it directly tested the core assumption. Did people want to buy shoes this way? The answer quickly was yes.
And what did he learn from doing that?
He learned crucial things very early. He learned that returns were going to be a big factor, which led him to realize that outstanding customer service and things like free shipping and free returns weren't just nice-to-haves. They were essential to building trust and overcoming the can't-try-them-on barrier. That insight became the core of his successful, refined strategy. But that learning only came because he tested the waters first. He didn't just dive in based on a plan.
That distinction, the fixed vision, but the flexible, evolving strategy that really sets the stage for the absolute core of this whole thing, doesn't it? The engine that drives it all.
It does. And that engine is the build, measure, learn, BML feedback loop. This is the fundamental operating rhythm of a lean startup.
Build, measure, learn. Okay, bring that down.
It's an iterative cycle. You start with an idea, which is really a hypothesis based on your vision. You quickly build a product, or maybe just an experiment, to test that hypothesis. Then you measure how customers respond, collecting real data. And finally, you learn from that data whether your initial hypothesis was right or wrong.
And that learning feeds back into the next cycle.
Exactly. Based on what you learned, you decide whether to pivot, change your fundamental strategy, or persevere, keep refining the current path, and then the loop starts again. Build the next iteration, measure the results, learn from them.
And the absolute key here, you're saying, is speed. getting through that whole loop as fast as possible.
Absolutely critical. Minimizing the total time through the loop, not just the build phase, but the entire cycle. Build, measure, learn, decide, build again.
Why is speed so paramount?
Well, partly it minimizes wasted money and effort, but more importantly, it minimizes the time you spend operating under false assumptions. Every minute you're working on something customers don't want is waste.
And what makes that speed meaningful? How do you know you're actually making progress, not just spinning your wheels faster?
That's where validated learning comes in. This is the real measure of progress in a startup environment, especially under uncertainty. It's the only metric that truly matters early on.
Validated learning. What does that mean in practice? It sounds a bit academic.
It's actually very concrete. It's not subjective feelings. It's not telling optimistic stories to your investors. It's not rationalizing things after the fact. Validated learning means acquiring empirically derived truths about your business.
Truths backed up by what?
Backed up by hard, quantitative data collected from real customers engaging with your product. It's about demonstrating measurable, positive improvements in the metrics that actually matter to the business.
So let's say a team spends like 3 months building a super complex new feature. They launch it, and their beta users completely ignore it.
Right.
According to validated learning, that 3 months of effort, it was waste, right? Even if the code is elegant and brilliant.
Precisely. Total waste, regardless of the technical achievement. And this connects directly back to the core ideas of lean manufacturing, pioneered by Toyota, actually. The relentless elimination of waste.
What constitutes waste in a startup context? It's not like leftover materials on a factory floor.
No, but the principles apply. Waste in a startup includes obvious things like waiting time or building up excess inventory, not of physical goods, but of untested features or code. Defects, like software bugs, are waste. But the most critical form of waste is overproduction.
Overproduction meaning?
Building features, building capabilities, building anything that customers ultimately don't value or need. If a feature isn't going to be valued, if developing it is a waste of precious time, energy, or money. The lean approach demands you have the discipline to not build it, or to cut it if it's already there and isn't proving its worth.
It's interesting. The loop is called build, measure, learn, but you suggested earlier the planning often happens almost backwards, like learn, measure, build.
That's a really important insight for executing this well. Before you jump into building anything, the disciplined approach is to first articulate clearly. What do we need to learn right now? What's the riskiest assumption, the biggest hypothesis we need to test to make progress?
Okay, start with the learning goal.
Yes. Then you work backwards from that learning goal to figure out what's the absolute minimum thing we need to build the minimum product or experiment that will allow us to measure and get the data we need to achieve that specific learning.
So the experiment itself is the product, in a way.
In this model, yes. An experiment isn't just thinking about something, it's always the first product, or at least the first version of the product designed for learning. And this totally reframes the core question. It shifts away from the purely technical challenge of, can we build this thing?
To what?
To the much more critical business questions.
Yeah.
Should we build this thing? And ultimately, can we build a sustainable, profitable business around this thing? Those are the questions that need answering first.
This focus on fast, targeted learning naturally leads us to, well, probably the most famous and maybe most misunderstood concept from lean startup, the MVP.
Ah, yes, the minimum viable product, MVP. It's definitely a term that gets thrown around a lot, often incorrectly.
So let's get the definition right. What is an MVP, according to this methodology?
Its definition is very precise. The MVP is the version of your new product that includes only those features absolutely necessary to do two things. One, test a core hypothesis about your business, and two, enable one full turn of that build, measure, learn loop as quickly as possible.
Only the absolute necessary features.
Minimum. The emphasis is on minimum. And viable doesn't mean perfect or polished. Viable means it's functional enough to get that crucial feedback and data. The MVP is explicitly a tool for learning, not for impressing people with perfection. The goal is to start generating data and learning immediately. Polish can come later after you've validated the core idea.
I can see why entrepreneurs struggle with this. There's this urge to make a good first impression, right? Releasing something that feels unfinished or minimal might feel damaging to the brand or just embarrassing.
It's a huge mental hurdle. It requires what some call the ego death of the traditional founder. The old way might involve spending 6 months, maybe a year, perfecting the branding, adding every conceivable feature, polishing every pixel.
Right, the big reveal.
The lean startup approach says, can you build a bare bones version in 2 weeks that tells you whether customers actually care about the core problem you're solving? If you can, do that. Because every single hour you spend polishing a feature before you validated the fundamental need for it, that's risk accumulating.
Because if you find out you were wrong about the customer need,
Then all that polishing time, all that effort, all that money is now officially waste. The goal of the MVP isn't to maximize initial revenue or user count, it's to maximize the learning you get per unit of effort invested.
okay, so the MVP is the tool. How do you decide what to test with it?
Yeah.
You mentioned hypotheses earlier.
Right. To structure that learning effectively, every startup needs to identify and ruthlessly test its core assumptions. These are often called the leap of faith assumptions.
Leap of faith. Why that term?
Because these are the foundational beliefs upon which the entire business idea rests. If these assumptions turn out to be false, the whole business model collapses. They are the things you are taking on faith initially, but which absolutely must be proven true.
And are there common types of leap of faith assumptions that most startups share?
Yes, there are generally 2 critical hypotheses that need testing very early and very rigorously. The first is the value hypothesis.
Value hypothesis, meaning
This asks, does our product or service actually deliver value to customers once they start using it? Is it solving a real problem or fulfilling a real desire for them? And critically, if they use it once, is the value strong enough that they come back, that they stick with it?
Can you give an example of validating that?
Think about early Dropbox. They needed to prove their value hypothesis. Would people find significant value in having their files seamlessly synced across devices without needing USB drives? The rapid adoption and high engagement rates quickly validated that yes, this solved a major pain point and delivered immense value.
All right, so that's the value hypothesis. What's the second critical one?
The second is the growth hypothesis. This asks, how will new customers discover our product? What channels will work? And crucially, can we acquire customers through these channels in a way that is sustainable for the business model?
So even if the product is valuable, if you can't get it to people efficiently,
the business still fails. A product can be incredibly valuable. People who use it might love it. But if it costs you, say, $500 in marketing to acquire each new user, and that user only generates $100 in lifetime value, your business model is fundamentally broken, even with a great product. You need to validate both value and growth.
and how do you actually test these hypotheses? You can't just sit in the office and theorize, right?
Absolutely not. This brings us to another core principle. You have to get out of the building.
Get out of the building. Literally.
Pretty much. It represents the concept of customer development. It actually mirrors a Japanese management term, genchi gembutsu, which means go and see for yourself.
Go and see.
Go and see your potential customers in their natural habitat. Understand their world, the crucial facts you need, what their real pain points are, what clumsy workarounds they're using now, how much they might actually be willing to pay for a better solution. Those facts exist only outside the 4 walls of your office. They don't exist in spreadsheets or brainstorming sessions.
And how do customers reveal these truths?
Through their actions, or sometimes their inaction. Not just by what they say in a focus group or survey. Do they sign up? Do they use the key feature? Do they come back? Do they pull out their credit card? Their behavior is where the truth lies. Your strategy has to be built on that deep, firsthand, empirical knowledge of your customer.
Let's loop back to the Zappos example again. Nick Swinburne getting out of the building wasn't just about talking to people about buying shoes online.
Exactly. He wasn't running surveys asking, would you hypothetically buy shoes online? His MVP, the website, with photos from local stores, was designed to observe actual behavior. Were people willing to go through the friction of ordering, even knowing it was this weird manual process behind the scenes?
Were they willing to make a transactional commitment?
Precisely. That high-friction, low-tech MVP simulated the core transaction of an e-commerce business. It tested whether the perceived hassle of online shoe buying was outweighed by the convenience or selection. The fact that people did order, despite the imperfections, that was powerful validation of the value hypothesis before he invested millions in warehouses and inventory. It took the what-if out and replaced it with real data.
Okay, so getting out and interacting is crucial, but talking to potential customers sounds easy, but it feels like it can be really tricky to do well.
Oh, it's remarkably difficult. It's fraught with potential pitfalls.
Like what? What are the common mistakes people make when they try to get out of the building?
One of the biggest traps is that entrepreneurs often end up selling their idea or trying to validate their preconceived solution rather than genuinely trying to learn about the customer's current behavior, their existing problems, and their unmet needs. They go in with an agenda to prove themselves right.
And biases can creep in really easily, I imagine.
Hugely. Several cognitive biases are constantly at play. There's selection bias, for instance. Founders naturally gravitate towards talking to their friends, their family, maybe early enthusiasts who are already invested in the problem space. These people are likely to be supportive and positive, but they might not represent the broader market.
Okay, so talking only to people likely to agree with you. What else?
Then there's confirmation bias. This is where you subconsciously frame your questions in a way that leads the person to confirm what you already believe. Asking things like, wouldn't you agree that this amazing feature would solve all your problems? Instead of open-ended questions like, tell me about the last time you faced this problem.
Leading the witness, basically.
Exactly. And maybe the most insidious one, especially in face-to-face interviews, is acquiescence bias.
Acquiescence bias.
Yeah, it's the tendency for people to agree with you just to be polite or because they don't want to disappoint the passionate founder sitting across from them. They might say, oh yes, that sounds amazing, I would definitely use that.
But they don't actually mean it.
Their words say yes, but their future actions, whether they actually sign up, use it, or pay for it, often reveal the truth was no, they were just being nice. This is why observing behavior, action, or inaction is so much more reliable than just collecting opinions. Especially for really new disruptive products, customers might not even understand what you're offering well enough to give meaningful feedback anyway. Their reaction might be based on confusion, not genuine assessment.
Okay, so getting good data is hard. Relying on actions over words seems key. This need for objective data, despite the challenges, leads us directly into how you actually manage and measure progress in this uncertain environment. You mentioned traditional accounting doesn't really work here.
No, standard accounting practices, GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. They're designed to measure the performance of stable, ongoing businesses. They track things like cost of goods sold, profit margins, asset utilization.
Things that make sense when you have a predictable business.
Exactly. For a startup, sure, you need to track cash burn rate and runway. That's critical for survival. But those numbers don't tell you if you're actually building the right thing. They don't measure learning or progress towards finding a sustainable model. That's why the lean startup framework requires something different. Innovation accounting.
Innovation accounting. It sounds formal, like a new set of books.
It's less about formal bookkeeping and more about an alternative system of management and measurement. It's specifically designed to track progress towards validated learning. It provides a disciplined, systematic way to figure out if the startup is genuinely making progress on its journey to find a sustainable business or just burning cash while chasing a dead end.
How does it work? What are the steps?
It generally operates in 3 distinct methodical steps. Think of it more like a scientific management process using metrics rather than traditional accounting.
Okay, step 1.
Step 1. Use your minimum viable product, MVP, to establish a real quantitative baseline. Measure how your product is performing right now against those critical leap of faith assumptions. What's your current conversion rate? What's your retention rate? What's the engagement with the core value proposition? Get the real, sometimes ugly, starting numbers down.
So establish the current reality with data. Step 2.
Step 2. Tune the engine. This is where the iterative experimentation happens. You run a series of structured small batch experiments specifically designed to improve those baseline metrics. You hypothesize, if we change the onboarding flow like this, we believe the activation rate will improve from 15% to 20%. Then you build it, measure it, and see if you were right. You're deliberately trying to move the needle on key metrics.
Okay, so targeted experiments to improve specific numbers. And step 3.
Step 3. Based on the results of all that engine tuning, you make the critical decision, pivot or persevere.
Ah, the big choice.
Yes. The decision is driven entirely by the quantifiable outcomes of the experiments run during the tuning phase. Did the changes produce the desired improvements in the metrics? If yes, great, maybe you persevere on the current path, continuing to optimize. If no, if despite your best efforts, the metrics aren't improving significantly towards a sustainable level, that's strong evidence your underlying hypothesis is flawed. And that means a pivot is likely necessary.
This whole system seems designed to force brutal honesty based on data.
It is. And a crucial part of that honesty is learning to distinguish between metrics that actually tell you something useful about customer behavior and business health, and those metrics that just look good on a chart but don't mean much.
You mean vanity metrics?
Exactly. This is where so many founders, especially inexperienced ones, get completely derailed. We have to stress the danger of vanity metrics. These are the numbers like total website hits, cumulative registered users, many of whom might be inactive, total downloads, social media likes, maybe even gross revenue if costs are ignored that can give you a false sense of security.
They make you feel like you're making progress.
Precisely. They often go up and to the right, which feels good, but they can easily deceive you into thinking the business is healthy when the underlying model might be fundamentally broken. They're often easy to manipulate, buy more traffic, and very hard to tie back to specific strategic decisions or real learning.
Right, so if I run a big marketing campaign and I get 1 million clicks on my ad, that sounds great.
It's impressive in a headline, right?
Yeah. But if only, say, 10 people actually sign up and become active users from those million clicks, the metric that really matters isn't the million clicks, it's the tiny conversion rate.
Absolutely. The million clicks is largely a vanity metric in that scenario. The focus must be on actionable metrics. These are metrics that demonstrate clear cause and effect relationships. They are tied directly to specific customer behaviors and ultimately to the viability of your business model.
What are some examples of good, actionable metrics?
Things like customer acquisition cost, COC. How much does it cost you to get one new active customer? Activation rate, what percentage of people who sign up actually experience the core value of your product? Retention rate or churn rate, are customers sticking around? Net Promoter Score, NPS, can be useful for gauging satisfaction. Revenue per customer. Conversion rates at each step of your funnel.
And cohort analysis sounds important here too.
Critically important. Cohort analysis involves tracking the behavior of specific groups of users who start at the same time, e.g. all users who signed up in January. You track their retention, engagement, monetization over time. This is vital because it lets you see if changes you make to the product are actually improving behavior for new cohorts compared to old cohorts. It isolates the impact of your changes from just general growth trends. If a metric doesn't help you make a concrete decision about what to do next, change the product, change the marketing, pivot, then it's probably not actionable and likely a form of waste.
Okay, so you've used innovation accounting, you've focused on actionable metrics, you've run experiments, and now the data is in. This leads to that fundamental fork in the road you mentioned, pivot or persevere.
This is the moment of truth. It's where the discipline really counts. Based on the validated learning or lack thereof gathered during that tune the engine phase, the startup leadership has to make the call.
Option 1, persevere.
Right. If the data shows that your experiments are successfully moving the key metrics in the right direction, towards a point where the business model looks viable, then you persevere. This doesn't mean you stop iterating. It means you continue refining and optimizing along the current strategic path. You double down on what's working.
Option 2, pivot.
If the data shows that despite your best efforts, you're not making significant progress on the core metrics, or you've hit a plateau far below what's needed for sustainability, then you need to face the hard truth. The current strategy isn't working. It's time to execute a pivot.
And a pivot isn't just changing something small, right? It's more fundamental.
Exactly. A pivot isn't just tweaking a feature or changing button colors. It's a structured course correction designed to test a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, the business model, or the engine of growth. It's a change in strategic direction.
But it's important how it's framed, isn't it? It's not admitting failure.
Absolutely crucial framing. A pivot should not be seen as a failure. It should be reframed and celebrated as a learning milestone. It's an admission that the path you were on towards the vision was wrong, but the vision itself might still be right. You're using what you learned to choose a new, more promising path towards that same ultimate goal. It requires abandoning the failing strategy without abandoning the company.
And does the data suggest that companies that successfully pivot actually do better?
Overwhelmingly so. There was a significant study that looked closely at software startups, and the findings were really compelling. Companies that managed to pivot once or maybe twice, they tend to be significantly more successful.
Well, much more successful.
On average, they raise about 2.5 times more money, they experience 3.6 times better user growth, and they're about 52% less likely to scale up too early compared to companies that either pivot constantly without learning or those that are too rigid and never pivot at all. So pivoting, when done based on validated learning, is actually a strong sign of management maturity and adaptability, not weakness.
That's fascinating. So adaptability pays off. Are there common types of pivots, like different ways a company might need to change course?
Yes, while the specifics vary hugely, pivots tend to fall into several recognizable patterns, reflecting the different ways a startup's initial hypotheses can be wrong.
What's a really common one?
Probably the most frequent is the customer need pivot. This happens when the team realizes, okay, the technology we built might be cool and people seem generally interested, but the problem we thought we were solving isn't actually the one they care most about. They discover the customer has a different, perhaps adjacent problem that's much more painful, and their existing product or technology could be adapted to solve that problem instead.
So same tech, different problem focus.
Often, yes. Or maybe the target customer segment was wrong. They thought they were building for enterprise, but discover small businesses love it. That's a customer segment pivot.
What about pivots where the product itself undergoes a major change?
Right. You have things like the zoom in pivot. This is where a single feature, which was originally just one part of a larger, more complex product, turns out to be the only thing users really care about. So the company decides to strip everything else away and focus entirely on making that one feature the whole product.
Is there a classic example of that?
Flickr is often cited. It apparently started as a photo sharing tool within a much larger, ambitious online game called Game Neverending. The game itself didn't take off, but people loved the photo sharing part. So the founder zoomed in, ditched the game, and Flickr was born.
Interesting. And I guess the opposite can happen too.
Exactly. That's the zoom out pivot. What you initially thought was the entire product turns out, based on customer feedback, to be too small or insufficient on its own. So you broaden the scope and your original product becomes just one feature within a larger, more comprehensive offering.
Are there pivots driven more by the how than the what's, like the technology or the business model?
Definitely. A technology pivot happens when you realize you can solve the same core customer problem and deliver the same value, but much more effectively by using a completely different technology stack or platform. Maybe moving from a web app to a native mobile app, for example, because the performance or user experience is vastly better there for the specific task. Instagram's early history involved pivots like this.
Tell me more about Instagram's pivot.
Well, it originally started as a much broader, location-based check-in app called Burbernin. It had lots of features, including photo sharing. The founders, Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger, noticed using their own data analytics that while people weren't using most of Bourbon's features, they were using the photo sharing capabilities quite actively.
So they saw that signal in the noise.
Exactly. They made a tough decision. They basically scrapped Bourbon, performed a major zoom-in pivot focusing only on photos, and also a technology pivot by building a very simple, fast, native iOS app optimized purely for mobile photo sharing. They hypothesized that simplicity and speed on mobile were key, and they were right. That dramatic pivot created Instagram as we know it.
And then there are pivots around how the business actually makes money, right?
Yes. The business architecture pivot, like shifting from high-margin, low-volume sales to low-margin, high-volume, or vice versa. Or the value capture pivot, changing how you charge for the value you create, like moving from a one-time purchase to a subscription or a freemium model.
What usually forces a team's hand? What are the common triggers, internal or external, that make them finally say, okay, we have to pivot?
Well, externally, the most powerful trigger is usually clear, sustained, negative customer reaction, especially seeing consistently low activation or retention rates. If people try your product and just don't stick around, or if your attempts to improve those metrics keep failing, the market is telling you something fundamental is wrong with the product or its value proposition.
So the sticky engine failing, as you might put it later.
Precisely. If the bucket is too leaky, pouring more users in the top won't help. Internally, a common trigger is realizing you have a flawed business model. The classic example is when your customer acquisition cost, OC, is stubbornly higher than your estimated customer lifetime value, LTV. Even if people like the product, if it costs you more to get them than they'll ever pay you back, the business is simply unsustainable financially. The math just doesn't work. That forces a pivot towards finding cheaper acquisition channels or a way to increase LTV.
Okay, so through iteration, validated learning, and maybe a pivot or two, startup finds something that works, they validate value, they see a path to growth. What happens next? The focus shifts from just learning to actually scaling, right?
Exactly. Once you have that validated learning, once you've found a product market fit and a potentially sustainable business model, the game changes. Now, the goal is to achieve sustained, predictable growth. And the Lean Startup Framework identifies 3 engines of growth that power this phase.
Engines of growth, what does that mean?
It means that sustainable growth that isn't just a one-off spike from a marketing campaign typically comes from specific feedback loops where the actions of your past customers directly contribute to acquiring new customers. Startups usually find that one of these 3 engines becomes their primary driver of growth, and they should focus their efforts on optimizing that specific engine.
Okay, let's break them down. What's the first engine?
The first is the sticky engine of growth. This engine is all about customer retention and engagement.
Keeping the customers you already have.
Exactly. Growth happens if and only if your rate of acquiring new customers is consistently higher than the rate at which existing customers are leaving, your churn rate. The primary focus here is minimizing churn and maximizing customer lifetime value.
What kinds of businesses rely on the sticky engine?
Think about businesses with subscription models like Netflix or Salesforce or enterprise software companies. Their goal is to make the product so valuable and integrated into the customer's life or workflow that leaving is painful. They constantly need to add value to keep churn low. If your monthly churn rate is, say, 5%, you need to acquire more than 5% new customers each month just to stay flat, let alone grow.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Keep the bucket from leaking. What's the second engine?
The second is the viral engine of growth. This is where growth happens primarily through users spreading the word to other users, often as a natural byproduct of using the product itself.
Like word of mouth, but amplified.
Exactly. It's person-to-person transmission. The key metric here is the viral coefficient, often represented by the letter K. It measures, on average, how many new users each existing user brings in.
And what's the magic number for K?
If K is greater than 1, it means each user brings in more than 1 new user. This creates exponential compounding growth, often without needing massive advertising spend. If K is less than 1, growth will eventually fizzle out unless supplemented by other means.
Can you give an example of optimizing the viral engine?
Dropbox is a classic case again. Their referral program, Get Extra Free Space for You and a Friend when they sign up, was a brilliant optimization of their viral engine. It baked the incentive to spread the word right into the core product usage, needing more space. Hotmail back in the day, putting Get Your Free Email at Hotmail in every email signature was another early example. The product itself becomes the distribution channel.
Viral growth sounds powerful, explosive even. What's the third engine?
The third is the paid engine of growth. This is perhaps the most traditional in a sense. Growth here relies on investing money, typically revenue generated from existing customers, back into paid channels like advertising, sales teams, etc., to acquire new customers.
So spending money to make money.
Essentially, yes. But for this engine to be sustainable and actually generate profit, there's a fundamental economic rule. Your customer lifetime value, LTV, must be significantly and reliably greater than your cost per acquisition, CPA.
LTV, CPA.
Critically, if you make, say, $200 in profit from the average customer over their lifetime, LTV equals $200, and it costs you $50 through paid ads to acquire that customer, CPA equals $50, then you have a profitable paid engine. You can reinvest the profit from each customer, $150 in this case, into acquiring more customers, creating a scalable growth loop.
But if the numbers are flipped, if CPA is higher than LTV,
then every new customer you acquire actually loses you money. You're essentially paying people to use your product, accelerating your path to bankruptcy. The challenge of the paid engine is that acquisition channels saturate, costs rise, so you need constant experimentation and optimization to find new profitable channels and keep that LTV-CPA ratio healthy.
So a startup needs to figure out which of these engines, sticky, viral, or paid, is the primary driver for their specific business, and then focus on optimizing it.
That's generally the idea. While businesses might use elements of all 3, usually one engine dominates their sustainable growth model, and understanding which one it is helps focus experimentation and resource allocation effectively.
Beyond these big strategic loops and engines, the lean startup methodology also borrows some really practical, tactical concepts from traditional lean thinking, especially from manufacturing, to ensure that continuous improvement actually happens day to day.
Absolutely. It's not just about the big pivots, it's also about building a system for ongoing learning and quality. 2 key concepts here are working in small batches and using techniques like the 5 whys for root cause analysis.
Okay, let's start with small batches. You mentioned this earlier. How does that apply outside a factory?
Think about software development or even marketing campaign design. The traditional way was often big batch work for months on a huge software release, or spend weeks crafting the perfect massive marketing campaign, then launch it all at once.
Right, the big launch event.
The problem with big batches is the risk and the delayed feedback. If you spend 6 months building a huge software update and only discover a fundamental flaw or a major bug 2 days before launch, you've potentially wasted 6 months of effort. The cost of that error is enormous.
So small batches mean.
It means breaking the work down into the smallest possible chunks that still deliver some form of value or allow for a learning cycle. Instead of a 6-month release, maybe you release small updates every week or even every day, continuous deployment. If you're designing a marketing campaign, maybe you test multiple small ad variations with small budgets first, before scaling up the winner.
What's the main advantage of working small?
Speed of learning and risk reduction. If you release a small update daily and it contains a bug or doesn't resonate with users, you find out within hours or days, not months. The amount of wasted effort is tiny. You can fix it or change course immediately. Small batches minimize the cycle time of the build, measure, learn loop, which gives startups their most crucial competitive advantage: the ability to learn faster than anyone else. It also improves quality because issues are caught much earlier.
Okay, small batches for faster learning and lower risk. What about when things inevitably do go wrong? A bug slips through, a server crashes, a campaign flops.
That's when simply fixing the immediate symptom and moving on is the worst thing you can do. That's where the 5 whys technique comes in. It's a powerful tool for root cause analysis.
5 whys, like a curious toddler.
Kinda, but with a serious purpose. It's an adaptive process that forces the organization to stop, slow down temporarily, and invest time in understanding why the failure really happened so they can prevent it from happening again. You don't just fix the bug, you fix the process that allowed the bug.
How does it work in practice?
When a problem occurs, say, a website feature breaks, you ask why. You get an answer. Your example, because a database query timed out. Then you ask why about that answer. Using why did the query time out? Because the database was overloaded. You keep asking why about each successive answer, usually about 5 times, or until you drill down past the technical symptoms to the underlying human or process-related cause.
Can you walk through that hypothetical server crash example again? How did the 5 whys get from a technical issue to a human process issue?
Sure, let's retrace it. 1, why did the server crash? Because of an unexpected traffic surge, technical symptom. 2, why couldn't the system handle the surge? Because a load balancer didn't respond fast enough, technical system failure. 3, why didn't the load balancer respond fast enough? Because a recent configuration update had an error, specific technical cause. 4, why did the update have an error? Because the engineer skipped the automated tests, human action shortcut. 5, why did the engineer skip the tests? Because there was intense pressure to deploy quickly, and our system allows deployment without passing all tests. Systemic cultural root cause.
Ah, I see. So the root cause isn't the traffic surge or even the coding error. It's the organizational pressure and the lack of a process safeguard.
Exactly. The 5 whys forces you to look beyond blaming the individual engineer and ask, what in our system, our process, our culture allowed this failure to occur? Fixing that systemic issue, maybe implementing mandatory automated testing gates, prevents a whole class of future problems.
And you call this a natural speed regulator? How so?
Because the more problems a team encounters, the more bugs, the more failures, the more time they are forced to spend doing 5 whys analyses and investing in fixing the underlying infrastructure or processes. This naturally slows them down when quality is suffering. As they make these investments and the system becomes more robust, the number of problems decreases, the 5 whys interruptions become less frequent, and the team can naturally speed up again, but now on a much more stable foundation. It prevents the death spiral of constantly fighting fires instead of building value.
We've talked a lot about startups, but you also mentioned big companies like GE using these ideas. How does that work? How can a massive established company with layers of bureaucracy and compliance actually foster this kind of fast, potentially risky experimentation without, blowing things up?
It's a major challenge for large organizations, but there are ways. A key mechanism often used is the concept of the innovation sandbox.
An innovation sandbox. This is like a safe place to play.
That's exactly the idea. It's a mechanism designed to contain the potential impact, financial or reputational, of new, unproven, possibly disruptive ideas. It creates boundaries around the experiment. But, and this is crucial within those boundaries, the innovation team needs real freedom.
Freedom to do what?
Freedom to operate like a real startup. The team inside the sandbox needs to be small, cross-functional, including product, engineering, marketing, etc., and highly autonomous. They need the authority to build, market, measure, and even deploy products or features without going through all the standard corporate stage gates, lengthy approval cycles, and handoffs that typically kill speed and accountability in large companies.
So they get to bypass the normal bureaucracy within limits.
Yes, within the predefined limits of the sandbox. For example, limited budget, limited market segment, specific duration. And their success or failure isn't judged by traditional corporate metrics like immediate ROI or detailed financial projections.
How is their success measured then?
They are held accountable using the principles we've been discussing. Actionable metrics and innovation accounting. They have to demonstrate validated learning. Are they proving their hypotheses? Are they moving the needle on key metrics related to customer behavior? They report on learning and progress towards finding a scalable model, not just on hitting arbitrary milestones in a Gantt chart.
And you mentioned GE's FastWorks program saw real results from this.
Significant results. In one division, using these sandbox-like approaches and lean techniques, they apparently achieved a product development cycle that was 2 years faster and 40% less expensive than their traditional methods for a comparable product. It allows big companies to explore potentially disruptive innovations without betting the entire farm, helping them avoid the classic innovator's dilemma where focusing only on existing profitable businesses makes them vulnerable to being disrupted themselves.
Okay, this whole framework, BML, MVP, pivots, innovation accounting, sandboxes, it sounds incredibly logical, almost like a guaranteed path if followed correctly. But we started by talking about those horrific failure rates. 75% of even VC-backed startups fail. If this methodology is so powerful, why isn't it working better? Is the methodology itself flawed, or is it mostly just people not applying it correctly?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer is likely complex. There's strong evidence that a lot of the perceived failure comes from significant misapplication of the principles rather than fundamental flaws in the core ideas themselves.
What are some common ways people mess it up?
One frequent mistake is falling into agnostic experimentation, just running lots and lots of random tests without a clear strategic hypothesis guiding them. The methodology requires experiments to be driven by the vision and the core leap of faith assumptions. If you don't know what you're ultimately trying to achieve or prove, throwing spaghetti at the wall and calling it A/B testing is just noise, not learning. You need a clear strategy first.
And the MVP concept seems particularly prone to misuse.
Absolutely. A huge error is treating the MVP as just a crappy version 1.0 of the final product. Building something minimal, cutting corners, and then being surprised when customers don't like the buggy, confusing experience. They then declare failure too quickly. We failed fast.
Yeah.
Without realizing the purpose wasn't to launch a perfect product, it was to learn something specific.
They confuse testing a hypothesis with actually selling a product.
Precisely. The MVP might be ugly, it might be manual behind the scenes, like Zappos initially. Its sole purpose is to get validated learning about a core assumption as cheaply and quickly as possible. If customers hate the MVP, the learning might be, okay, this approach to solving the problem isn't right, not necessarily the problem doesn't exist. You need to interpret the MVP results correctly in the context of learning.
You also highlighted a critical strategic mistake earlier related to the growth hypothesis.
Yes, another major pitfall is overemphasizing product development, focusing solely on validating the value hypothesis while completely neglecting the equally critical growth hypothesis. Teams can build a fantastic product that users genuinely love, retention might be great, but if they haven't figured out a scalable, economical way to acquire customers, if LTV/CPA is bad or the viral coefficient is too low, the business is still fundamentally unsustainable. It will run out of money. You need both a great product and a working growth engine. Many teams build a beautiful car, but forget to build the roads to let people drive it.
Okay, so misapplication is a big factor. But are there also inherent limitations to the lean startup methodology itself? Areas where it's maybe less effective?
That's a fair critique, and yes, there are limitations. One point often raised is that the methodology, with its focus on iteration and data from existing users or near adjacent markets, is primarily optimized for incremental innovation. Tuning the engine, making small pivots, refining an existing concept.
It's less suited for.
It's arguably less naturally suited for generating truly radical disruptive innovation, creating entirely new product categories or markets where no direct customer data exists yet because customers can't even imagine the solution. In those cases, the initial vision and intuition play a much larger role, and trying to get validated learning too early from customers who lack a frame of reference can be misleading or even impossible. The relentless focus on immediate data might sometimes steer companies away from truly bold, game-changing ideas that take longer to incubate.
That makes sense. You can't easily A/B test the invention of the airplane.
Right. Sometimes you need that leap based more on conviction than immediate data. Another challenge is the human element, particularly the influence of outsiders like mentors or accelerators.
How can they interfere with the process?
Well, we've seen situations, especially within accelerator programs, where startups feel pressure to please the mentors, where the strong opinions or anecdotal experiences of a coach or mentor can actually override the objective data the startup team has painstakingly collected through their own experiments.
So the mentor's gut feeling trumps the startup's data.
It can happen. If the mentor is seen as an authority figure, their advice, even if not data-driven, might carry more weight than the team's own validated learning. This creates a real disconnect between the supposed scientific approach and what actually gets done. Plus, as we discussed, getting truly accurate data from customers is always hampered by their own cognitive biases or their inability to grasp a truly novel concept. The early learning loop can be incredibly noisy and hard to interpret correctly.
So it's not a magic bullet. It requires discipline, careful interpretation, and protection from external biases. But despite these challenges and potential misapplications, when it is applied well, the results seem pretty compelling.
They really are. The outcomes speak volumes. We've mentioned the macro examples like GE adapting it with FastWorks or Intuit using it for innovation, but you also see clear success stories at the individual company level that demonstrate the power of that build, measure, learn loop.
Like Dropbox.
Dropbox is a great example. They famously used techniques like an explainer video MVP to validate demand before the product was fully built. And once they had the product, they rigorously applied hypothesis testing and BML cycles to optimize the referral program and viral engine, leading to that incredible growth curve from 100,000 users to over 4 million in just 15 months. That wasn't luck. It was disciplined, iterative optimization.
Any other examples, maybe outside pure tech?
Well, consider Wealthfront, the automated investment service. They operate in a highly regulated financial environment, overseen by the SEC, where mistakes can be incredibly costly. Yet they famously practice continuous deployment, releasing small code changes multiple times a day, and use A/B testing and lean principles constantly to improve their service. It shows that even in complex, high-stakes industries, these principles of rapid iteration and validated learning can be successfully applied.
It really brings it home, this whole deep dive. The core idea seems to be that entrepreneurship isn't some mystical art reserved for geniuses with bottomless funding. It's actually a form of management. Disciplined management specifically designed for navigating extreme uncertainty, treating your brilliant idea not as gospel, but as a set of hypotheses that need rigorous testing.
That is absolutely the fundamental takeaway. The lean startup methodology provides a systematic framework for doing just that. It proves that entrepreneurship can be managed. It prioritizes learning, finding out what works over just blind execution. It's about conserving your most precious resources, time and money, by avoiding building things people don't want. It's about preventing that fatal premature scaling.
And it requires a certain mindset, doesn't it?
It demands adaptability. It demands rigorous, honest measurement. And, crucially, it demands that you leave your ego at the door. You have to be willing to admit your initial assumptions were wrong. You have to embrace those pivots, not as failures or signs of weakness, but as essential learning milestones, course corrections that guide you, step by painful step sometimes, towards the successful realization of your ultimate vision.
Thinking about that relentless focus on tested assumptions, on drilling down with the 5 whys to find the real root causes, it makes me think. So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Considering these principles of validated learning and really questioning assumptions, what is the single biggest leap of faith assumption floating around in your own current work, or maybe even your life right now? What's that one belief you're taking for granted that underpins a major plan or project that you really need to stop assuming and start testing? What mini experiment, what AVP could you run, maybe even starting today, to get some real data on whether that assumption holds water? What risk are you avoiding confronting that might be preventing you from the essential learning you need to actually move forward? This was it on today's book, guys. And guys, kindly subscribe and follow us for more such insights on various books. And also, do not forget to join our social media community to stay in touch.